Presiding Officer, I know the First Minister has spent the past few weeks thinking about financial mismanagement and the criminal justice system. So today I'd like to ask him about the overspend in the project to replace Barlinnie prison. Because the issue of financial mismanagement is not just about how the SNP run their party, it's about how they govern our country. This government's failure in managing the public finances has cost the taxpayer more than £3.7 billion. That's the result of failed interventions, waste and incompetence. Earlier this week, it was reported that the cost of building a new prison to replace Barlinnie has spiralled from £100 million to £400 million. So can the First Minister confirm that this project is running over budget, what he expects the final cost to be, and whether the new prison will be operational as planned in September 2026? First Minister.
We are, and this is an important issue, of course, raised by Sarwar. We are looking at the cost overruns. We're seeing what can be done to mitigate those cost overruns. I think we all agree in relation to the fact that Barlinnie is not in the condition that any of us would like it to be in. So we are exploring what can be done. Can I just say to Sarwar, I think he does the debate a disservice when he talks about the figure that he used, over £3 billion of wastage, as he describes it. In reference to that, I've seen the Labour press release. It talks about decisions that are for the Crown, for example, the Rangers prosecution. That is not a decision for the SNP government. That is an independent decision, of course, for the Crown and Procurator Fiscal Service. So it does it does in fact a disservice to the debate to include figures like that. So we are interrogating the figures in relation to Barlinnie. Of course, construction costs have increased for a whole number of reasons, of course, partly to do with the UK Government's complete mismanagement of the economy, but also to do with some global factors as well. We know the war against Ukraine, the illegal invasion by Russia, of course, has also affected construction costs as well. But to give him a direct answer to his question, those cost overruns are being interrogated, and we'll do everything we can to bring them down.
Sarwar. It's interesting that the First Minister wants to dispute £60 million out of £3.7 billion of waste under this SNP government. And I'm sorry, blaming Ukraine or the wider economic crisis or inflation on this crisis is not going to work. This is a 300% increase in costs at a time when inflation is running at 10%. Even an SNP treasurer can tell you those figures don't add up, because Scotland's prison estate is in a dire condition. At Greenock Prison, the Chief Inspector of Prisons is threatening to bring in the Health and Safety Executive because of the state of the building. In Inverness, the Prisons Inspectorate has said the prison is not fit for purpose. That prison was due to be replaced at an original cost of £52 million. That cost has now risen to almost £140 million. In fact, in all 5 major capital programmes in the criminal justice system, all are running over budget. So if the First Minister truly believes in transparency, will he commit to opening up the books, and would he welcome an Audit Scotland review into these projects so we can understand why costs are running out of control? First Minister.
Again, I mean, any sensible suggestions around the cost overruns, I'm happy to take away and to explore. But it is astonishing that Sarwar seems to suggest that these global factors, as well as, of course, domestic factors in relation to inflation, don't have any bearing on construction costs. I think that is not the reality. Of course, what has not helped our economy, what hasn't helped the economy at all, is, of course, a hard Brexit, which is now supported by the Scottish Labour Party, quite unbelievably too. So Sarwar is, of course, right to stand up here and to question the costs, be it of HMP Barlinnie and indeed the other prisons and indeed other infrastructure projects. Absolutely correct to do so, and they will be interrogated. You can bet your bottom dollar that they will be interrogated, because, of course, we are absolutely in really challenging financial circumstances. Again, no thanks to the UK Government. But what I would say to Sarwar, when his party was in charge, of course, their PFI projects, we are still having to pay. We are still having to pay £250 million in PFI payments because of the Scottish Labour Party. That certainly doesn't help our budget in any way, shape or form.
Sarwar. The First Minister talked about desperation earlier on. It is really, really desperate to say that a 300% increase in the cost of Barlinnie prison is due to somehow global factors around Ukraine and perhaps even Vladimir Putin. And it's also desperate, 16 years into an SNP government, to talk about decisions made by a government when the First Minister was 12 years old.
Mr. Sarwar, Mr. Sarwar,
and take responsibility for a change.
I would be grateful when Mr. Sarwar is putting his question if we could hear it and if members could resist the temptation to make comment at that point. Mr. Sarwar.
I can understand why they're frustrated, presiding officer, so maybe give them a bit of slack this week and maybe in future weeks as well. Because right across the public sector, project after project is running out of control. In health, the new Baird Family Hospital in Aberdeen, initial budget £163 million, now £244 million. In education, a new college campus in Dunfermline, initial budget £86 million, new budget £119 million. And, of course, in transport, replacement ferries for Lifeline routes, initial budget £97 million, now running close to £300 million. While families across Scotland are working out how to make ends meet, this SNP government and this First Minister's incompetence is allowing millions of pounds to disappear. This is a government that's been in power for 16 years and has lost grip on taxpayers' money and weakened every institution in our country. Scotland can no longer afford this chaotic, dysfunctional SNP government. Arrogant, incompetent and out of touch.
Mr.
So is it any wonder that people are concluding that it's time for change?
First Minister.
When it comes to the important issues of inequality and poverty, of course, that will be and continues to be a defining mission for this government. That's why, of course, we've invested in that game-changing Scottish Child Payment, which we know has lifted many hundreds of thousands out of poverty. When it comes to the Fuel Insecurity Fund, that was one of the first announcements, in fact, the first announcement I made as First Minister, not just to double it, but, of course, to triple it. Our Social Security Scotland, we have a number of benefits, 7 benefits that are available only in Scotland. A social security system that is based on fairness, dignity and compassion. So that is, of course, our focus when it comes to tackling inequality. Anna Sarwar says we are desperate, talking about decisions made by the last Labour government. I agree with him. It was many moons ago, and for good reason. And, of course, Jackie Baillie was in government very briefly at that point. But it is important to say the reason why we're still talking about it, the reason why we are still talking about it is because we are still paying for it. And Labour mortgaged our future. The Labour Party, the Scottish Labour Party, didn't just mortgage our future, they are mortgaging our children's future as well. So the fact that we are having to pay hundreds of millions in PFI payments 16 years on is, in fact, is undoubtedly the reason why Anna Sarwar doesn't want us talking about it. But, presiding officer, the important issues around construction of our prisons, of our infrastructure projects, I take seriously, this government takes seriously, and I can give them an absolute promise that we are doing everything we can to bring those costs down.